Smith corks one into right down the line. It may go. Go crazy, folks. Go crazy.
Breeze hits it in the air to center. We will see you tomorrow night.
This is the Viva Alberto's podcast on SB Nation. Welcome into another episode of the Viva Alberto's podcast. Returning today are writers Gabe Simons and Adam Akbani. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing this wonderful evening?
I'm doing great.
Not too bad. Looking forward to the podcast. I got some plans this evening. Gonna hit the gym later, so looking forward to both of those.
Well, until you get to the gym, I've got some entertainment for you and all of our great listeners at home. We have with us tonight, we have host of Foul Territory. You can follow and find that on YouTube. The Foul Territory Network is now expanding and growing across, multiple platforms. I also listen to them on Spotify. But host of Foul Territory itself, Scott Braun. Scott, how are you doing this evening?
Jake, Gabe, Adam, I'm doing great, and I'm pretty highly caffeinated, so maybe I'm a good pre-workout.
That's awesome, man. Let's get into it. So for any fans that may not be familiar with Foul Territory, we'll get into like how you came about developing that. But first, before that, I want to give fans kind of a sense of you. So I like to ask some new guests on our show who their favorite baseball player was when they were growing up.
Ooh. I mean, I didn't have one favorite. I had multiple. The one that I used the most is Ricky Henderson, even though I only got to catch the later stages of his career. Being someone in media who likes to bring a little spice, Ricky Henderson was a walking soundbite. So that part, obviously, of his game, the talking, was super cool and unique. His stories were hilarious. And then I loved his game. He had pop, he had speed. Played for a number of different teams that I was able to follow. So Ricky Henderson is the leader in the clubhouse for me. There were a number of others that come to mind, but that's the one that I used the most. So I'll go Ricky. And then maybe no surprise that my current favorite is Ellie De La Cruz, because speed for a while became such a rarity in our sport at a high degree. So when you have someone that can do it, can field pretty well, can hit homers, and just looks so different in terms of how he plays the game versus everyone else, that's the current favorite.
Now, if I remember correctly, you grew up in the Northeast, right? So were you a Yankees guy, or who was your team when you were growing up?
Mets. I was a Mets guy.
Close
growing
enough.
Up, so. Yeah, I mean, your Mets or Yanks for the most part. If you're in New York, North Jersey, right? When you get to South Jersey, it starts to get split into Philadelphia Phillies fans. But yeah, I was Mets growing up. I will say, and I mean this, the fandom does separate depending on who you are. I have plenty of people I've worked with that keep it to the highest degree, including people that are part of our Foul Territory network, right? I work with Alana Rizzo. She does some work with us on Foul Territory. She has Dodgers territory. She is a diehard Dodgers fan. I am not a diehard Mets fan, right? I am a diehard baseball fan, and I mean that. Sure, is it cool for me to see the Mets be successful because of who I grew up watching, and I like the ownership group. I love my family, and many of them are Mets fans. But I'm not living and dying with the team by any means, and I try to keep myself as neutral as possible. I think part of that was the play-by-play person in me as well.
And speaking of Foul Territory and all of its networks and its growing, we have Katie Wu, a friend of the show who hosts Cardinal Territory as a part of the Foul Territory network. How did Foul Territory come about, and how did that all happen for you guys?
Okay, so the simplest way that I'm putting it these days is, what if I could build a media network in baseball from scratch, right? I worked at MLB and MLB Network for a long time, but I didn't feel like I was being served as the consumer and the sports nerd baseball nut, right? I'm like, I really love podcasts. I love authentic takes. I want to hear more about a particular team. I want to hear prospect content. I want to hear from the players. I want to hear unfiltered conversations that players have behind the scenes. I want to hear a player interview a player if they're polished and they know how to get the best answers out of them. I want to hear Ken Rosenthal unfiltered, Jim Bowden as the resident GM, Buck Showalter, the manager, right? All these different people that were my favorites and that I think just really deliver it straightforward in a format that caters to the way that I like to consume sports talk. So we started building it in that form. And also being everywhere is important. So I was coming from mostly an old school linear television world. And now we are on 17 regional television networks, including all over St. Louis, but also all over the podcast space, the YouTube space. Have a cool social media team that helps put together all these clips and helps us post all kinds of things on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, etc. So to me, it was just everything that I had been pitching in my old job and thinking about for a long time, and finally just saying, you know what, I'm going to leave and I'm going to start this. And it is by far the best thing I ever did in my career. I have the most fun I've ever had. I love my schedule. I love the people I work with. You also get to run a company. I mean, that's what I'm doing. I'm the co-founder of the company. We have a number of employees. We treat them like family. And it's really cool because you only live once. And at some point, you're not able to do it if you're everyone. But if you're able to try to launch something, if you're that kind of person, and you've got that type of brain, that entrepreneurial spirit, and you feel like there's a void in a space that you love and know about, go for it. So that's what I did. And now we have 15 shows under the network. Yeah, that includes 11 team shows, national shows like Ken Rosenthal's Insider Show, Fair Territory, Baseball America partnership that has the show Hot Sheet. Trevor May has his show that's now coming over to our platform. And then Foul Territory, of course, is the monster of 2 hours of content live every single day. That was the plan with the OG group like AJ Pierzynski, Eric Kratz, Todd Frazier, Cam Maben part of the mix, Trevor May, Jason Kipnis, Ken Rosenthal, etc. It was like, hey, we're going to be on every day. Okay. I was at MLB Network for a long time. Now they've cut down on a lot of shows, but at the time they had a lot cranking. And I'm like, you have to be there for your audience every day. This is baseball. We're grinders. It's not football once a week. It's baseball. So that went into the whole thing. And then also the player access and showing off to the world how cool and interesting baseball players can be if you put them in the right position to succeed. We've had, I think at this point, over 600 player guest appearances in our first 2 years of existence. And I felt like it was really important to give the players more of a voice on a neutral platform where they could just air it out, be themselves, and in my mind, make the game cooler and more fun to consume besides the game itself. I thought that the NFL and NBA and even college sports with basketball and football were doing just a much better job of that than baseball. And we said, why? And then we went out to go and solve it.
Yeah, you guys do a really terrific job at gaining access and giving fans more content than they would reasonably expect from maybe their own teams that are kind of putting that out, and then players just on their social media platforms may not be as forthcoming about some of the stuff that they talk about when they come on your guys' show. So I definitely agree that, you having the presences of like an AJ Pierzynski and an Eric Kratz and yourself, and you guys really do tend to get the best out of players and the best responses and the most insight. And even what I really appreciate, especially for the last few months, is having the guys on that are free agents that can kind of come on and talk about what their free agent experience is like and kind of give fans the insight to what that is like. And you guys had on Scott Boras earlier this week, and I thought he was absolutely tremendous. Obviously, anytime that the mega agent starts speaking, everyone stops and listens. So I thought that was fantastic. Boys, if you got anything, go ahead and fire away for Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to ask from the outside looking in, what do you make of the state of the Cardinals organization as a whole, just broadly speaking?
I'm more optimistic than most Cardinals fans might be right now. We can complain all day about the spending. We do that probably more than any other show out there in baseball. We're here for the fans. So I get that part, the frustration of why is my team not spending enough on player payroll? So we can definitely have a conversation on that side. I do want to start here because I will definitely serve it to a team that's mistreating its fans, even teams that are pretty good, right? Like I rip Seattle right now. They built up. They've had so many years of missing the playoffs. They finally get there once, and then they just punch their fans in the face and pull back, and they don't add to their budget at a time when they have one of the best starting rotations maybe ever. And I would say definitely top 3 in the 21st century, okay? For Cardinals fans, this team has been a consistently good team if you look over the past quarter century. There's been a lot of success, a lot of winning. Almost every year is competitive. There's been World Series titles. So if you go through the entire body of work of the resume, I mean, it's not bad living to be a Cardinals fan. There's a lot of worse situations. If we're hyper focused on what's happening this very second, sure, it sucks. They're going through a transition right now. Should they have done something in the offseason? I'm always a fan of doing something. When you do nothing, you are sending a negative message to your players and to your fans. Like, this is still a business. Owners are obsessed with money. This is a business. Do you know the worst way to promote your team? Do nothing in the offseason. So I'm with you there. I feel you there. But I do think it's going to be a nice, smooth transition from John Mozeliak to Chaim Bloom. Sure, Chaim Bloom wasn't perfect with Boston. I can already point out to you, I think the worst thing he did was probably sign Yoshida, who actually hasn't been a bad bat for Boston. It just wasn't necessarily the right fit, and it was an overpay. But there are so many on the other side. He's built the best core of potential star prospects with Boston that they've seen in a long time, if not ever. Roman Anthony, top position player prospect in the sport right now. They traded away Kyle Teal to get Garrett Crochet, who costs nothing and could be a #1 starter for them this year. Oh, but wait, there's still 2 more prospects that could turn out to be at least very valuable big leaguers, if not all-stars. Christian Campbell, who should be up at some point this year, and Marcelo Meyer. So I'm going to look at that track record recently for Chaim Bloom and say, if I'm a Cardinals fan, good times are ahead again. I like the direction of the team long-term. This year is annoying, though.
And Scott, one thing I wanted to ask, which, I mean, I was going to get into what you were talking about with Chaim Bloom, but since you kind of already touched on that, I guess I will pivot to not a slightly off-topic question, but I know, like, when I was in high school, like, I'd come back from school and like in the evening I'd turn on and I'd see you like on MLB Network, and also St. Louis being a hockey town, I know you were also on NHL Network. You talked a little bit about MLB doing more. I know you talk about a podcast setting. It's easier to have more unfiltered conversations and get more authenticity. But how would you compare the overall, I guess, authenticity aspect of Major League Baseball versus NHL? I'm not like super in tune with hockey, but I know it's somewhat a more difficult sport to get in touch with some of the players. I feel like it's from what I've noticed. How would you compare those two, and what do you think NHL could do in order to maybe improve on that aspect that baseball has started to really build on recently?
So it's funny. I had this conversation at a meeting recently, and we power ranked 2 different things: accessibility versus interesting entertainment conversation when we're talking about player interviews with the 4 major sports. So I'll tier it this way. In terms of interesting entertainment, NBA #1. Often there's drama in MLB that takes over for a month, and we call it Tuesday in the NBA. So NBA #1, NFL #2. Huge, huge gap. Massive, massive gap. Go way, 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 way down. Then MLB, then NHL. The problem with NHL players is they often give you the cookie cutter answers. They're cliche after cliche. MLB players do it too. Every league has that, but the cliche power rankings are the same there. It's like with the NBA, the game ends, they come into the media room or they're in the locker room, and the microphones go up and on, and they just start talking like, okay, let me tell you what happened, right? Where you're like prodding and trying to get something different out of many baseball players and many hockey players. So the one part I'll go against you on is accessibility. I actually think hockey players are very accessible. They just, and I'm generalizing here, often don't give you much because I just think they're so programmed to do it's all about the team and just working our best and grinding and all that. Okay, cool. I get it. I just think we have to advance past that. And there are 2 sports that have done that and 2 sports that are still behind there. This is part of the mission statement of Foul Territory, is to get us closer to the NFL and NBA type of conversations and answers in interviews.
No, appreciate it.
Katie Wu, friend of the show, host of Cardinal Territory, as we had talked about before, part of the Foul Territory Network, which you can hear Mondays and Fridays. They recently sat down with manager Oliver Marmol and Cardinals minor league pitcher Gordon Graceffo is the episode that came out today. Katie this morning released a tell-all article titled 9 Teams, 2 Close Calls, and 1 Block Trade, detailing the Nolan Arenado saga this offseason. Scott, did you have a chance to read that this morning by chance?
I did not.
Okay.
I was already cranking on shows. I've been on hours of shows. I saw the tweet and I'm excited to read it once I get off a run of shows, so you guys can help to inform me on it. Obviously, I read everything that she puts out there, and she's part of the FT fam. I did see the tweet about how Houston was initially on the list, and then obviously he rejected it. So I'm excited to learn more about that storyline because I was baffled at the time. I'm like, this is an awesome fit for you.
Yes. So Gabe and I were both at the Cardinals winter warm-up event that they hold annually every year, and John Mozeliak was there, and he did speak to this a little bit, but basically the way he had kind of put it, and this article does kind of help fill in some of the blanks on that situation, but he had referenced Kyle Tucker being traded away right around the same time that they had agreed in principle to a deal with the Astros for Nolan Arenado, and from there, his estimation was one of the reasons why it kind of fell apart. Not only was, the Alex Bregman situation kind of up in the air, they weren't really sure where that was going, but also because Kyle Tucker had just been traded recently, and his opinion was maybe the order of operations, if they had gotten the Nolan Arenado thing done before they had traded away Kyle Tucker, that likely that would have influenced a different outcome than the one that had occurred. And so where Arenado kind of stopped and paused was he questioned kind of the direction that the team was going. Now, obviously, that's after the fact, and they added Christian Walker and Isaac Paredes and a couple other names they've kind of added at the edges. But it looks like Houston's primed to at least go into the season attempting to go for it again. And so I think the way he kind of put it was, well, let me backtrack for a second. The initial 5 teams that were listed were the Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Padres, and the Astros. Those were the 5 confirmed teams that were on his list. And even now, he's not really willing to expand that list beyond that. And he cited, family as a reason why he doesn't want to move his family all over to different places. There was mention of the Tigers, the Royals, the Mariners, who all had reached out and had varying degree, and the Angels all had varying degrees of interest at certain points throughout the offseason, but most of them, or all of them, were non-starters for him. So he was very selective. And then at the end of the day, he has talked, at length about a desire to wear a Cardinals red jacket for their Cardinals Hall of Fame. And that likely is something that he has kept in the back of his mind and wanting to be here in St. Louis. And so the way that we've read it here from St. Louis is that Nolan was only ever going to accept a deal if it was going to put him, right in the crosshairs of a World Series contended opportunity. And it seems like that situation never quite came about. And so that's why he remained.
All right, so let's pick through this. So I'll have you do this. Jake, just go one by one on the 5 teams, and then I'll give you my quick take on the situation.
Okay, let's start from the top. We'll start with the Dodgers.
No chance, no room for him. Next.
Padres.
No chance this offseason because no room for the contract.
Right.
The Padres actually are spending a lot of money. They're really up there in player payroll. They've got ownership strife. They still actually did add Nick Pivetta the other day, but it's kind of a deferred deal where most of the money's getting paid in year 2. And
they're also talking about...
They have Manny Machado,
yeah,
right? So then already Nolan has less value to San Diego, and they don't have room for him anyway, and they don't need him at first base. Nolan's value right now is at third base, where he's still a very good defender. Is he the best in the league? Maybe not, but that one didn't make sense. Okay, what's next?
Yankees.
That one actually does make some sense. I don't know why the Yankees weren't interested in him, but the Yankees are a very, very analytical team. They make most of their decisions that way, whether they tell you that or not. And in my mind, they also base it very, very hard on hard hit rate, and now probably are looking at the what is it that I'm looking for? The swing stats, right? Because I know the swing stats that came out around the second half of last year were really hard on Nolan Arenado, and saying that, his swing has kind of slowed down. So that is, to me, like the perfect reason why a nerdy front office like the Yankees would be against that. I think that's a mistake. I think Nolan would definitely help the Yanks. There also could have been a money battle there where the Yanks were just like, we don't want to eat a lot of this contract. And in that, it makes it less appealing to trade him away. So that's actually a valid spot, but they clearly were not interested.
I think that factors into, and obviously the Marcus Stroman saga that's continuing to kind of, linger on, and the Yankees, and weirdly enough, Hal Steinbrenner at certain points this offseason has cried poor, which, for you as a resident New Yorker probably sounds a little weird given how you grew up and just, how you perceived the Yankees organization as a whole. And so, I wonder how his father would have reacted if he had ever heard him speak that way publicly. Would have been
take away his equity.
It would have been wild.
Gross. It's so embarrassing. They're worth more than any other franchise, including the Dodgers.
Yes.
Shut up, Hal. Gross.
Absolutely.
Okay. Billionaire on another planet. Okay. Next team.
But they can't compete because the Dodgers are doing things they can't, right? Right.
We feel so bad. That's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for, my home area when someone says something like that. And then, also, who doesn't say something like that? The dude across town.
Right.
Who's making them look kind of bad right now. Not necessarily on the field yet, but making them look bad. And he even says, we got to be disciplined, and I don't want to always be blowing past the luxury tax that's named after me, the Steve Cohen tax. But he doesn't say, oh, we can't compete, we don't have enough. That was an embarrassing quote. Everybody around the industry was cracking up at that, saying, is this dude watching games? Is he paying attention to life? Is he just trying to take money out of the team? That was bad.
It was very bad, and very bad. If we think that at certain points John Mozeliak's PR is rough, that one was an all-time step in a puddle of what from Hal Steinbrenner there. The next, we'll finish with the last two that seem to be the most likely, and we'll start with the Astros.
Okay, so that was the spot. They served it up for him. Both sides agreed. Houston was taking a very nice amount of money. They were on the list on a personal side. Obviously, I don't know where family is, where he wants to go, and all of that. From a money standpoint, you would have made more. State income tax in Texas, there is none. Good team. That's bad homework if you don't think that they were a contender, even post Kyle Tucker. Are they the leading contender? No. They've been one of the 3 most dominant franchises in the past decade. You at least have to make that case, right? I mean, they're in the playoffs every freaking year. They still have a really good rotation. They still have plenty of good core there. Yordan Alvarez is a top 10, probably top 5 at least at this point, bat in the sport, and clutch as can be. There are plenty of players there. And like you guys said, I mean, they still picked up pieces right after that. But I give credit to their ownership group, Jim Crane, because he was like, oh, you don't want to be here? Okay, cool. And they pivoted in 5 minutes.
Right.
And got what they wanted. So that was a massive mistake if he really did want to be there, and saying that you want to wait and see things out. I mean, it's so difficult to pull off trades these days, more so than ever before, that if you had an opportunity there and you were interested in that team, that was your one shot to take it. And then finishing with Boston, of course. Yeah, that was also a viable option. If they don't sign Bregman, do they still try and make a last minute play there? Maybe, but they ended up getting Bregman. So now it's a moot point.
Right, and that was the last team was the Red Sox, and they're dealing with some of their own kind of messy situation that Tristan Casas has kind of put himself in as well, which I know
well,
some of your
think about it, Jake. He wouldn't have had a spot there, I guess.
Well, that's true.
If they did agree to a deal, Devers says, I don't know what I can say on here, but F off. This is my position. And oh my gosh, I mean, Alex Bregman or Nolan Arenado are worlds ahead of Devers with the glove. Devers is an amazing, amazing bat, but I mean, he needs to move over for those guys. And I mean, that's me. I'm coming from the fan perspective.
Right.
I disagree with Kratz and AJ on our show, the regulars who say, nah, he's a superstar, you got to keep him happy. I'm like, but he wants to win. He blasted the organization last spring training, rightfully so, for not giving him enough support. And now they're getting support. And then he's like, no, I want to hug this position, even though I've been rating as one of the worst at that spot defensively. So I'm just like, what do you want? What do you want? You want to play the position, or you want to win?
And you make good points, but I mean, I can also understand why AJ and Kratz would also say that, just because they're vets, they've been there, done that. They understand the way that the actual environment of the clubhouse works, and the big money guys, you keep them happy, keep them, wherever they want. Us fans, in theory, things should be a certain way, but in practice, they don't always wind up that way. And so I just think it's interesting given both perspectives on your show, which is one of the reasons why I enjoy it so much.
Yeah. Scott, so you were kind of talking about this just now when we mentioned the Dodgers. We've seen the past couple of off seasons, them really kind of think outside the box while still playing by the rules in terms of giving a lot of these free agents larger contracts and deferring the money. We see other teams kind of do it as well. I know Jeff Passan had to tweet about that. Just a kind of quality anger of a lot of the other 29 major league fan bases. And, like we just mentioned, they're not doing anything illegal, but there is quite a bit of backlash in terms of how other owners maybe are not spending as much as their fans would like, or not adopting a similar strategy for large scale free agents. I just kind of wanted to hear your take on, what is a solid middle ground that allows for optimal pay for athletes while, still addressing the somewhat competitive parity concerns that we've seen over the past year and a half within Major League Baseball.
Everyone's allowed to do deferrals. They added in there to players as an ask, and many players take it for a variety of reasons. They're not the first team that has done this. They won't be the last. Half of Anthony Santander's contract is deferred with the Blue Jays. The Nationals did this with Max Scherzer and tons of other players. They won a World Series in 2019. Was anybody complaining that they had deferred money contracts on the books? I think it's silly, and most people just don't understand finance and how obviously money depreciates over time and the value of the dollar changes. And that's how the deferrals work. The league comes up with a net present value number. So does the Players Association. That number is a little bit different based on how they do the math, but close enough. So it is a complete non-story in my mind. And you're not going to get players to change that approach. It doesn't matter. Any team can do this. And there are rules in place where they don't just have the money disappear. It's not like they're just putting it in some risky, finance, stock, crypto account, whatever you want to call it. There are rules where I think it's within the first year, it has to be documented where that money that's being saved up goes to be able to pay the deferred money over time. So it's a total non-factor. The league has this all buttoned up. It's fine. So people are just crying because they're spending. It doesn't have to do with the deferrals, right? If the Dodgers payroll was $150 million and everyone was on deferred deals, people would be like, oh, that's fine. They're just trying to find something to pick on and say that it's an unfair advantage. It's stupid.
I largely agree with that. I feel like a lot of it is, if you have an issue with it, go to your owner and have them, because, at the end of the day, they need to be offering the same kind of contracts in order to compete with LA with what they're offering, and they're just not willing to do so. So
Adam, bigger problem, and this ties into it if there's a future salary cap, is don't think that MLB players aren't like NBA players. And if you start to bring salaries down or cap them, that they won't just go to play with their friends. That's the biggest problem we're having right now with the Dodgers, is so many other teams don't want to compete. The Dodgers can actually sometimes offer below market deals to players. Teoscar Hernandez had better offers elsewhere. He wanted to go play with his friends. They're running the organization so damn well right now. That's a problem. Okay. They get Roki Sasaki on a nothing contract, who's a super talent because he wants to go play with the best team in baseball. That's a problem. So if you have a salary cap and everyone's restricted in a certain way, you're going to have more people want to go play with their friends and lead to super teams. I think the big market teams will be stronger than ever if we do it that way, and there'll be less parity than we've ever seen. Almost every team has made the playoffs in the past decade. I think there's only a few that have missed. And so once you get into the playoffs, of course, there are playoff teams. There are teams that are better built for the playoffs. But I mean, 2 years ago, we saw the Diamondbacks and the Rangers in the World Series. The Rangers were early on, their rebuild, and the Diamondbacks were a mid-market payroll. So our sport's fine in my mind. The problem is, of course, one that can't be solved because you can't force an owner to sell a team. But I mean, the team I probably use the most in this case is the Pirates. Bob Nutting is in it for the money. That's a problem. He's a steward in our sport. He doesn't care about winning.
I'm so glad you had to say that. I'm glad that you got to say that, because I think more people need to hear that overall take. And exactly the way that you laid it out is what I hope more people will be able to adopt in their thinking.
Yeah, don't go after the Dodgers for caring and trying, and then winning creates more money. And of course, everyone should have been going after Shohei Ohtani much more. The Dodgers said they made at least $100 million. Now, this is not public, but we speak about it publicly. They didn't put it out in a press release, but the numbers I've heard are anywhere from $100 to $150 million that the Dodgers made on Shohei Ohtani being added to the mix and the kind of sponsorship deals they were able to do. So if I know about that, I'm another team. I'm offering this guy $1 billion in free agency. There were not that many teams in play. Some of that had to do with, I think, him wanting to play for them and him kind of dictating the terms of his free agency. But damn, I didn't hear about any team suddenly going, hey, let's offer this dude $1 billion because we're going to make money off of him. I think a lot of teams are just not run well.
100% agree.
So to sort of pivot to the Cardinals, I would say a lot of the success for this upcoming season rides on specifically Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman. How do you see those two players in their future, would you say? As being disappointment so far, I would say.
I mean, you guys know more than me about each of them, but I'll give you my thoughts. Jordan Walker up, down, originally coming up and doing okay from like a basic stat standpoint, and then sending him back down. It's just a mishandled development so far. That doesn't mean it's always going to be like that, but that's been tough. I think he's always struggled to have to pay attention to how he's got to play the outfield. That's tough for him. So I think he'll still be okay, right? I mean, he's shown us plenty of signs, but I put a lot of this on the organization so far. Is he going to be a superstar? Probably not. Could he be a very productive bat in the big leagues? Yes. Do I want him in the outfield? No. I love defense, especially outfield defense with the amount of fly balls we have in our sport. I would be careful there. So I would like to see him as more of a first base DH in the future. That doesn't seem like a realistic option for them right now. They already have what, 2 or 3 first basemen, including a catcher that just moved to that position. So it's a little bit clunky right now, guys, in terms of the pathway for him.
I will push back a little bit on your assessment of Jordan Walker maybe being more earmarked for first base. When you talk to scouts, they have a 70 grade on his throwing arm that plays up in right field. He has I believe 77th percentile sprint speed, so he has the athleticism, the ability. The problem has always been that he hasn't had the necessary coaching or experience in the outfield, and he's had the opportunity all off season and now all spring training to work with John Jay, who's a former I don't know if he ever won a Gold Glove, but he was one of the better defenders.
He's a good fielder.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he's known for his ability to teach outfield fundamentals in a significant way. He brings different drills that are fun and engaging for guys to learn, and you know how important that is, that the right teacher teaches the guy the right thing. And so he has all of the physical traits to be a solid to above average, potentially outfielder. He needs the experience, the reps, and he also needs the proper guidance to show him how to, because before he made his debut in 2023, he didn't get shifted he played third base up until about 2 months before the end of the 2023 season or 2022 season. And so he spent basically 2 months in the minor leagues in the outfield before being rushed to the big leagues at the beginning of 2023.
Okay, so maybe third base, but yeah, the reads right now have been bad. So yeah, I hope that's a buddy of mine, John Jay, fixes it. So I'll give you that one. I'll give you another year. Why? Because they're kind of in that mode where they can do it, and we can see what it looks like. Because so far, yeah, as far as playing the outfield and running down fly balls, from what I've seen, it has not looked good.
Well,
yeah, I'll buy that on the speed and the throwing arm.
You throw them out there. I mean, that's what I'm saying is, like, you put somebody in a position where they've never, or they don't have the necessary either, coaching or experience to perform well there. You're not setting that player in the best position to succeed. And so that's why it's like, I caution people to like take what they've seen already and keep that in the back of their mind as that's what he is. That's not what he is. He has more growth and more learning and more development to go. You mentioned you do a hot sheet with Baseball America, and I'm sure those guys tell you all the time, development is not a linear process. The guys go back and forth, up and down, right and left, whatever. It's never just a straight line process. And so while the Cardinals have not handled the process properly, it's also just a part of that growth and getting themselves to that point where they are capable in that position. They have to learn to fail, all of that.
Yeah, of course. Right. And we read the great story from Katie towards the end of last year about how they took a lot of resources out of their development.
Correct.
And they paid the price for that. With Nolan Gorman hit tool, will there be enough for him to be a productive, consistent, above average player? That's the part of the game that I'm looking at the most. You guys tell me if there's something else that you need to see that stands out more than that. But that's what we're looking for. Give him a full run and see what it looks like. This is the year. And I know they've talked about it where you want to get the young guys that you have question marks about as much time and as much reps as possible, even if they have to play through some pain in terms of slumps.
Yeah, look.
One thing, or Go ahead. Or hold on a sec. So I know, like you mentioned about how his throwing arm is a 70, which is two. It's a plus arm out in right field, and we did see some strides upwards in his defensive ability, despite still being below average. That's just how bad he was in 2023 out in right field. Mind you, a move from third base to right field is a move down the defensive spectrum. You still got the arm that it plays in both positions because you're throwing across the field in both scenarios. But a year and a half isn't a non-insignificant time for the guy to learn the position. And it just hasn't been quality to the point where even if he figures it out, we don't believe the consensus is that he won't be more than an average or 50 right fielder, which isn't bad. But ideally, you have better options out there defensively. And it's not like you're taking his bat out of the lineup completely. You take that and you couple the fact that Contreras, the team is in a rebuild situation. That Contreras, it's not a complete wrong that he would maybe be moved at some point within the next year or two. A spot would open up for Jordan Walker on the infield again. In terms of his arm and his athletic ability, you really can't put the cart before the horse. If he can't field, then his arm really doesn't do that much talking. If he can't get to balls, or if his reads and reactions aren't the best out in right field, right? Because ideally that arm is in play to get guys out of third base, and if he's not getting to balls, there's almost an opportunity cost where if he's not playing the position well enough out there in right field, then it's almost a moot point just how good his arm is. And you'd rather, cut your losses and stick the guy at first base just to ensure that you get better defense out in right field, despite how good his arm may be. Because if, you put a guy out there in right field who's a plus defender, that's going to, account for more value than what an arm could be in general.
I'm not interested in moving a 23-year-old right fielder into further down the defensive spectrum until, we see what a full season looks like after having legitimate, teachings from an actual outfield instructor. Not that he wasn't getting that from Willie McGee, but we also know that he spent a significant time down in AAA where they were lacking in coaches to help him with that progress and process. So I'm going to hold in reserve judgment and wait and see what this season looks like before I make a further determination on what he looks like going forward.
I will say it's a little unfair to say that Willie McGee isn't a quality coach.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I didn't say he wasn't a quality coach. I said Jordan Walker didn't get the opportunity to spend a majority of the season with him in the major leagues because he was up here with the major league club, and Jordan Walker was in AAA trying to figure out his swing. His focus wasn't on playing right field and getting better at it. His focus was trying to get better at getting his swing back to a point where it could get him back to the majors.
Well, he's doing both, right? These guys are not just saying, okay, we're going to be training just hitting. It's a holistic approach. It's not just saying, DH only, coach for only hitting because we don't see at all. They tried in right field with him and he's gotten better, but it's not to a point where they believe he's going to be a major league plus right fielder. He's probably going to be average at best, maybe slightly below fringy range at best, with the arm doing a lot of the talking and carrying some of his value.
Sure. We'll get into that more later. Scott, I had just one last question. I know you're on a tight schedule, so I'm just going to throw this one last question over to you. And I know you said you like it whenever guys really bring it, so here it is. Yesterday on Foul Territory, you had Heath Bell on. Given that he's a former All-Star closer himself, he has the right to say whatever he wants, and his respect for Trevor Hoffman is well-deserved and understandable. But he said something that kind of ticked me off. He said Ryan Helsley's use of Hell's Bells as his intro music was disrespectful, and I feel like that was a little bit of a soft take. I think he could have phrased it better and said that he preferred nobody use it because it's synonymous with Hoffman, but they say that that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, and Helsley is about as respectful of a guy as it gets. So I don't love his take. How did you feel when he said that, and do you agree that Hell's Bells should be off limits for any reliever going forward?
I'm in the middle on this one. Sometimes I'm super passionate on topics, like watch me earlier today on the Yankees facial hair policy. That was ridiculously archaic. I just don't care that much about this one, to be honest. But I see both sides. There are some guys that are just so much about honoring and respecting the game. I also don't think that they own that song. I did agree with Heath. Like, there are plenty of other options and songs that you can pick that still would include the fun of Bell, without thinking of that right away. Okay. Or Hells, obviously, with Helsley. You're right. There's no ill will with Ryan. I know Ryan pretty well too. He's awesome. He's a great dude. He's pretty mild-mannered and respectful. So I'm in the middle. I understand the old school point because AJ has this point too, but I also just think it's a non-story and not a big deal to me. So that's my take. My take is that I don't care much.
Fair enough.
And
Fair enough.
So I guess my take is more tilted towards it's okay, Ryan. You're fine.
Okay. Got it. Scott, thank you so much for your generosity and your time and for joining us. I know it was really late notice, but you were able to kind of work something out for us. So I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you for doing it.
Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate it, and great show.
Thank you so much. And for Gabe Simons and Adam Akbani, we will catch you guys on the next episode next week. We're also doing a second episode this week tomorrow with Matt Pauley of 1120 KMOX. Have a great night. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Viva Albertos podcast. Please leave a rate and review on your favorite platform and turn on those bell notifications so you can be notified the moment our newest episode is released. As always, make sure to give us a follow on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Facebook. Just type in Viva Albertos on any platform to find us. Have a great day and thanks for listening.